All right, welcome everyone. You know me as OPNerd, but since we're going to have a discussion that's, a serious topic and very personal, as you can see here on the screen, I'm actually revealing my name to most of you for the first time. It is Dennis, and then my friend here on the left, if you've watched me or if you know either of us, you would know him as OPNerd, but his name is Nicholas, so welcome to you.
Hi.
And what we're going to be discussing, if you can't tell by the big graphic here that says let's talk vegan, we're going to be talking about veganism. So I'm going to let Nicholas kick things off here, because first of all, he's going to define what that is, not only for people that may not know what veganism is, but maybe just to provide some clarity. And then I also going to have him spend some time, since he is vegan, talking about what that change was, because I know, like, you've been vegan for maybe certainly over a year, but not quite 2 years, right?
Probably only about a year, I think.
About a year. Okay. So obviously, having made that recent change, there are going to be some reasons as why he decided to do that. So if you would go ahead and take it from there.
Right. Well, we'll start off with the definition. The definition of vegan, according to the Vegan Society, goes like this. Veganism is a way of living which seeks to exclude, as far as is possible and practicable, all forms of exploitation of and cruelty to animals for food, clothing, or any other purpose. And I simplify that to trying to cause as little harm to animals as possible.
Okay. Do you think it's at all important to differentiate between veganism and vegetarianism?
Yeah, because a vegetarian or vegetarianism is just a diet where you don't eat meat or the flesh of animals, and there could be pesco-vegetarians who still eat fish, and the usual kind of vegetarian is an ovo-lacto-vegetarian who still eats ovums, eggs from chickens, and lactations from a cow, milk, but they still wear leather and stuff, and obviously you can't get leather without killing the cow, so there's a big difference between veganism and vegetarianism, because you could just as easily wear some polyester or cotton or whatever and not wear leather.
Okay.
And be a vegan.
So, as you said, it's been about a year since this became a lifestyle choice, and I guess you would also say a cause, because it's something that you actively promote and talk about on Twitter. So, what brought that about in your life?
Well, I'll start from the start, I guess. Growing up, I ate a pretty shitty diet, thanks to my mom. Thanks, Mom. Of deep fried sausages, and the veggies we did have was smothered in butter and all that. When I was about 15, I started to actually think about animals, and at some point in that time, I figured, well, it's probably wrong to kill animals for food, but I just felt like I was, stuck with inertia, and everyone else did it, so I just sort of went on as how everyone goes. When I was about 19 or 20, I entered a relationship online with someone who's known as Froggy717 on the internet, who was a vegetarian, and I was the classic dickhead to vegetarians. I would end the stream, but I'm going to go and have a meal now, and she'd be in the chat, and I'd be like, yeah, I'm going to go and rend the flesh from the bones of a cow, and shit like that. But I did get exposed more to vegetarian ideas and vegan-centric information. And at one point specifically, there was a YouTube video from Athene, whom I followed at the time, who talked about vegetarianism. And so it was just in my mind a lot more at that point. Finally, I was like, man, I'm just eating animals just out of laziness, so I'll just become vegetarian. I've just got to do it now, finally. And I became vegetarian, and I felt pretty good about that. And my mother and grandmother were both like, but where will you get all your nutrients? They literally, my mom, the first thing he said, but where will you get your nutrients? No specific nutrients, just, but if you're not eating deep-fried sausages, you're going to starve to death. Then I came to America to meet Froggy, and we married, and we're living together now. And occasionally, I was streaming at the time, people would ask me on the stream, like, hey, you're a vegetarian, why do you still drink milk and eat eggs? Because you care about animals, right? That was why I was vegetarian. And I just had weak reasoning, like, oh, milk's good for your bones, right? And well, you got to have eggs. They're healthy for you. So, and chickens just lay eggs. They don't have to kill the chickens. Sure, they do kill the chickens, but they don't have to. So it's like, oh, it's not exactly the same as eating meat. But eventually, it was getting to me in my mind. And one night I just couldn't sleep because my conscience was keeping me up. So I was just browsing vegan sidekick comics on the internet. And basically every excuse and justification I had, he covered in a comic and made me look like a total idiot. So I was like, well, after like a couple of hours of just flipping through these comics, I was like, well, guess I have to be vegan now. And as soon as I made that decision, I was able to sleep. And the next morning I told Froggy, hey, I've got to go vegan. And she went vegan shortly after that. And yeah, then we died of protein deficiencies shortly after. And I come back as a ghost to tell you all about it.
I can tell. I noticed there was something different about you. I can tell you are a zombie.
The slight transparency.
Yes. Okay. And then if there is anything that you want to ask me, like specifically about myself before we'll start, we'll do that in just a second. But I just wanted to say that I am here and that I'm not vegan. And while I support anybody's choice to live that or a very similar lifestyle, I don't. So I think it's going to be easier for me to he talked about some of the arguments people have or misconceptions they might have about veganism. And of course, there are also people that actually think veganism is wrong, that would try to stop somebody from living a vegan lifestyle. He gave the example of his mom and, saying, but you're going to die of malnutrition or something like that. And I know there's going to be at least one and maybe a couple of different ideas and beliefs I have when it comes to things like animal rights, and then the discussion will branch out from there. But before we're just going to cover a few topics. We don't really have a set agenda, so we may find ourselves going down some strange paths. We may not get to some particular points we want to cover. But before we really start, was there anything that you wanted to ask me as far as my background and things like that?
I didn't think of anything until just now. I was like, well, have you ever been vegetarian or vegan or considered it or anything like that?
So as far as having been, no, and having ever seriously considered it, I'd have to say no. The closest I've come is, and as you would be aware, and some other people that would watch my broadcast have been aware, going back to about a year ago, I'd had a hospital stay, and while it wasn't really it was pneumonia, but in the process of getting out and getting healthier, I thought, oh, well, while I'm doing all this and trying to just improve myself physically, I started looking at, things like my diet. And it just so happened to be that around that same time is when you started, tweeting actively about, just veganism, stuff like that. So, I've looked at the articles specifically when it comes to personal health issues, how to eat better, to live an active lifestyle. So I've tried both vegan recipes, vegan pre-made foods that you can buy at grocery stores, and just a general reduction specifically of meat products, because I'm probably, I've never eaten a lot of eggs, but I'm probably still eating the same amount of eggs that I used to. And I've never been much on seafood. I have it occasionally, so I'm not eating any more or less seafood than I ever did before, because I never ate that much to begin with. But meat intake has definitely been reduced, and particularly in the last 6 months or so, going back perhaps to just November of last year, that's where I've started to notice a difference, both for, I guess you'd say, for positive and negative, because overall I feel my health has improved in part because of that. But the negative part comes from there are some days where the cravings are really, really strong, and I suppose that's true with anything when you're used to consuming it or intaking it, and then there's either you completely stop intaking those things or greatly reduce it. Then I think it takes your body some time to adjust to those things, and it's probably different for a lot of people, but certainly in my case, there are times when I'll even plan oh, I was going to have a salad today or something like that for lunch. And then come lunchtime, when it actually comes time to eat, I'm thinking, gosh, I really would like, a steak or bacon or something, some sort of meat product or animal product.
Well, I think it would be a good idea to talk first about health, because you brought it up. And also, if you can't possibly be healthy as a vegan, there's really no point discussing it because people just won't go vegan anyway. So, there may be people who say, oh, well, there might be someone who needs animal products. There may exist some obscure medical condition that requires some specific nutrient from animals. And I read about a kid who had a specific amino acid absorption problem or creation problem. He couldn't create it from plants, so he actually did have to get this amino acid from animals back in like 1910s or something. That may exist. And those specific people might either have to eat animals, or perhaps we can make synthetic medicine for them, the wonders of modern medicine. But for the general public, like 99.5% of the population, probably even more, a vegan diet can be perfectly healthy. There are important things, though. A vegan diet could be Oreos and Coca-Cola, or it could be broccoli and rice, or whatever. You see, there's a huge spectrum. Vegan diet is just no animal products. Or, I mean, I suppose if they were enslaving monkeys to pick coconuts, you wouldn't eat those coconuts either. It's about not harming the animals. But a diet of whole plant foods should be healthy for, practically everyone on the planet. And all the major dietetic and health organizations in the world agree with this statement, including the American Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, the Mayo Clinic, Harvard Medical School, and a bunch of others. You can go to reddit.com/r/vegan, click on the wiki, and they've got a whole list of all the diet organizations' positions on vegan diets. They all say stuff like, it is the position of the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics that appropriately planned vegetarian, including vegan diets, are healthful, nutritionally adequate, and may provide health benefits for the prevention and treatment of certain diseases. These diets are appropriate for all stages of the life cycle, including pregnancy, lactation, infancy, childhood, adolescence, older adulthood, and for athletes. So whether you're a bodybuilder or a pregnant lady or a baby, a vegan diet can be perfectly healthful as long as you're not just eating Oreos and other garbage.
And by the way, I did take some time to, I don't know if it's the study you're referring to, but the one specifically from Harvard Medical is something that I spent some time going over, simply because at least here in the US and probably throughout the world, Harvard Medical is regarded as one of the premier, organizations when it comes to medicine and health. So in case some of you were wondering, while I couldn't necessarily vouch for the other things that he's referred to, yes, Harvard Medical has done numerous studies, or they've pulled data together from numerous observations showing that yes. And as far as whether or not there are people that might have health issues due to a lack of, say, meat or other animal products, I mean, I think it's possible, simply because, you think I can sit there and eat a whole bag of peanuts, and somebody out there can eat one peanut and it can kill them. So there are some differences in human physiology where people will react to certain things differently than others.
Indeed. In general, specific physiology can differ between people, but in general, the way your digestive system works and everything, basically everyone should be just fine eating whole plant foods. And by the way, people can be like, oh, but I have IBS. I can't eat fiber. Wrong. Go to nutritionfacts.org and look up IBS. Anyway.
It's like a lot of things, including even things like what are considered illegal drugs and alcohol. Moderation is almost always the key, because fiber is insoluble, and if you were to eat a huge amount of it, more than your body can get rid of easily, it can cause as much problems as not having any fiber in your diet.
Have you ever read a study where people got fiber from whole plant foods, not fiber supplements, and had any problems because of the fiber?
For too much, yes. For having too much of it in your diet. Like I said, you can overdo it on everything. Yeah, it's one of the more recent ones. In fact, it was something that was touched upon in one of the Harvard studies, just showing that this is fine, but it can be difficult for your body to get for your body to have too much in there. So like I said, in anything in moderation, because fiber isn't going to provide everything that you need. Soy isn't going to provide.
Fiber doesn't specifically provide nutrients that you can digest.
But
it's important for the bacteria in your gut.
Yes, it helps. It helps your body process food, and it's just like one of the reasons that a vegan diet could be and probably would be healthier for most people is specifically the reduction of meat intake, because it's difficult for your body to process meat. It takes longer to process meat than it does a lot of other things, and the more of that you eat, the longer time that it takes. And then I'm sure we're going to get into this, because it's also what's in that meat when we get to talking about like how these animals whose meat that you're finding in grocery stores, how they're grown, how they're raised, the conditions that they live in. That's another slew of problems as well. So yeah. So I know when we were talking about the few things we wanted to mention, I think you said you thought it was most important to start with the animal rights issue, right? Was that where you wanted to go with, just because you thought everything kind of...
Sure. I just think it's worth mentioning one more thing about health. People have some common issues with a vegan diet, like, oh, you're going to be vitamin D deficient or B12 deficient or whatever. So I wanted to mention most of those are complete nonsense. The two actual common concerns that people have are vitamin B12 and not eating enough calories. You'll see quite a few vegans say, oh, I switched to a vegan diet, and what they mean is a diet of lettuce. And they're like, oh, but I was so hungry all the time. And when you switch from eating animal products, which are very calorie dense, to whole plant foods, not just a vegan diet of Oreos or whatever, you need to eat more food, because to get 2,000 calories from chicken, it's like less than 2 pounds of food. But to get 2,000 calories from potatoes, it's almost 7 pounds. So your portion sizes have to increase. That's as simple as that. Why some people, when they go vegan, like, oh, I was just so weak and I was so hungry all the time. They're literally just not eating enough. And vitamin B12 is created by bacteria, which is why it's found in animal tissues, because they get it from the bacteria in the soil, and they get vitamin B12 supplements and stuff. There are concerns that because we live in such a sanitized world, this B12 producing bacteria doesn't exist enough in the environment, on the vegetables and stuff like that. It exists in your digestive tract, but you don't, you clean your hands after you poop. So you're not going to be eating that back either. So lots of doctors recommend a B12 supplement, and supposedly it's perfectly safe. I usually say wait until you have a blood test that confirms you have any deficiencies before you start supplementing that things, because supplement companies aren't well regulated. But yeah, B12 is easily supplementable anyway, if it really is a concern.
Well, on that, I mean, kind of on that same subject, and especially someone who, only relatively recently on a regular basis has changed up their diet. A lot of concern for people that, you might be able to convince somebody and get them to understand the health benefits of a vegan diet, but then you also have to overcome what they like and what their preferences are, because it is different. I mean, if you've eaten a lot of meat products and or other products that are just not terribly healthy, like the Oreos and cookies that I mentioned, on a regular basis, to switching to something that's more healthy is going to be difficult. There are tastes and textures that are going to be different. For example, we were talking not too long ago about the fast food franchise Wendy's, which in some areas, including where I live, recently introduced a vegetarian burger. And while the taste is similar to what their actual animal meat patties would taste like, it is still different, and it is still a different texture, and that would just take time for people to get used to. And that's going to be one of the reasons why they don't even want to try it. I don't like the taste. I don't like the way it feels. And I don't know what way there would be to overcome that. And in the end, it's going to be up to the individual if they even want to give those alternate products and alternate diets a shot. And a lot of what we're going to be talking about in the end will come down to people eventually having to make the choice to change their lifestyles, to question their beliefs, because that, changing those beliefs might be important to changing the lifestyle and so on. But yeah, and that's, I guess that's what we're going to address right now. When the beliefs, perspectives when it comes to the rights of their animal, or from some perspectives the lack thereof. So, did you want to start with this? Because
sure.
Okay.
First of all, I'll say calling the topic animal rights gives a different impression to what I would actually want to talk about. Because when you think animal rights, I don't know, you think like voting.
Okay. Well, let's say, how about the ethical treatment of animals?
Yeah.
Okay.
The only right I want animals to have at the moment is the right to be left alone, is pretty much it. Yeah. So rights, there's one right, and it's just to be left alone and not too bothered. Anyway, I wanted to start with this. In order to justify treating two things differently, in this case that would be animals and humans, you must identify a difference or collection of differences between these two things which would justify reversing that treatment if the difference was reversed. For example, why we use this kind of reasoning in morality and ethics. I think it's okay to kick rocks, but it's not okay to kick dogs. The difference that justifies this difference in treatment is that rocks aren't sentient, so it just doesn't matter if you kick them. They're not going to perceive it in any way. But dogs are sentient, so if you kick them, they're going to feel pain and suffer, and it's going to affect that dog. If the difference were reversed, I would accept the reverse treatment. Dogs, if they were not sentient, could be kicked all you like, and rocks you wouldn't be able to kick or allowed to kick because they were sentient. So, in my eyes, that justification works, and I think most people would agree that because rocks are not sentient, it's perfectly acceptable to kick them, and because dogs are sentient, you shouldn't kick them. A further example that's more relevant to actual history is the enslavement of black people. So, Bob from the 1700s says, I think it's okay to enslave black people, but not white people. In order to justify that difference in treatment, Bob must identify a difference or collection of differences between black people and white people. You guys can go ahead and try to think of some, but I don't think bigger noses, darker skin, and lack of education at the time would justify the difference in treatment, because if you took a white person who had a big nose, different colored skin, and hadn't been educated, it still wouldn't be okay to enslave that white person. So the justification doesn't work, and therefore, if it's wrong to enslave the white person, it's wrong to enslave the black person, because there is no difference between those two justifying the difference in treatment. To apply that to veganism, UOP think that it's okay to kill animals unnecessarily for taste preference, but not to kill humans unnecessarily for taste preference. I imagine you can tell me I'm wrong about that after this. In order to justify that difference in treatment, you must identify a difference or collection of differences between humans and animals, which, if reversed, would justify unnecessarily killing humans for taste preference.
Okay, so I guess now would be a good point to or a good time for me to describe my point on this, because and it can be kind of detailed and lengthy. I'll try to keep it to the point. So for me personally, and vegans might differ from this, and also other people that don't have vegan beliefs might differ from mine, but I've always, for my adult life, shortly after coming out of the Army, which is coming up on 30 years now, I've viewed humans as animals. We evolved on this planet along with all the other species that are out there, including some that are no longer around. And I don't place humans above animals. I put us on the same level. And when it comes to that evolution, humans have been omnivores, and other animals out there are either omnivores or carnivores. And it's been part of nature's cycle for up until this point that some animals eat other animals and some animals kill other animals. Where I think we would have a lot in common because when you talk about, justifying treating, one person or species different than another, of course, we're talking about the way that these, the majority of the meat that you find in your markets, the way that those animals are raised and treated before they're actually slaughtered for their meat is, it's not just something that I think would concern anybody that is either vegan or cares about animals, but people that may not be aware of it might be shocked. You could, I'm sure, if you just go to Google, if you go to YouTube and do a search for like animal slaughter, right? If you haven't ever seen that before, you might actually be in for a shock for what that process is like. And prior to the slaughter, if you were to look at the conditions that animals are kept in, just for example, pigs are raised in these cages that are so small that they actually can't even stand up. Fowl, like chickens, for example, because they have beaks and because they're just kept in these close, cramped quarters, birds would begin pecking at each other, and of course that would ruin the meat, so to speak. So they're debeaked, and then
to specify debeaking, when they're a baby, they use a hot knife to chop off the end of their beak.
Exactly.
Just clarifying.
So I mean, that's a small example of what those conditions are like, and then of course the animals are under a lot of stress. That's putting it mildly. And of course, it might be hard to imagine from an animal's point of view what that's like, especially since they don't have the ability to like articulate what they're thinking and feeling. But if you were there, because I have been to slaughterhouse not once but twice, because there was one down the street, you can tell. Like when if you have a pet, when your dog is happy or sad or scared. And it's the same thing with these animals, in their living conditions as well as leading up to the slaughter. They sense what's going on. Could they articulate it? Do they understand it at the level that we do? Maybe not. But it's a life of misery and terror, if I were to use two words to sum that up. And so where Nicholas and I would probably agree on this point is that it's inhumane, it's horrible, and that would be the one thing that I think we would agree on that we'd want to stop. Now, of course, being somebody that would still eat meat and views humans as omnivores, where the meat has always been and can be a healthy part of our diet, granted in greatly reduced quantities, like I would say as a minimum, no matter how much meat you eat, maybe reducing by that as much as 80%. And of course, you could go full vegan if you wanted to from there. But when you go to the market to purchase that meat, you're doing what I've always called voting with your wallet, which specifically means you're saying, hey, I am willing to pay money for this product. So you create the demand that these industrial farms then supply, because to get those meats at what most people would consider to be a reasonable price, you have to cut corners somewhere that can be profitable and that you can provide that product at a price that people are willing to pay. And so those corner and cost cutting measures come in the way that the animals are treated, and also and I don't think a lot of people realize this. You're probably aware that these various animals are pumped up with various chemicals and other hormone treatments and things like that. And in addition to those things, adding to the misery that those animals suffer because they're not living naturally, their physiologies are not what nature intended it to be, you are also suffering from that. The reason that simply cutting back on meat, regardless of the source that it comes from, would be a bigger issue for most people is that those chemicals, those hormones, the unnatural additives that animals are being fed or injected with also have an impact on you. And if you were to look at some of the tweets that Nicholas here has sent out regarding some of the negative health impacts from eating meat, that is a part of it. It's not just the meat itself, it's what's in the majority of that meat out there. So while Nicholas wouldn't support this, I'm pretty sure, for me, the consumption of meat would be from animals that I think the common term is free ranging. They're just left to live a life that's a little more natural, that's humane. You know, they're cattle, for example, that have an actual pasture to graze in, that are not pumped up with these hormones. You know, in the end, yes, they're still killed, and that's where the big difference would be. But at least having them live a more, you know, stress-free, you know, life where they actually have room to move around and, you know, breathe free air, you know, until the point where they're, you know, killed for consumption, is what I now use to buy my meat. And this is actually from a friend of mine. This is even before Nicholas started tweeting, because again, for me, it's never been about, you know, how animals were treated preferably. But a friend of mine just introduced me to a meat producer here in Salt Lake City, Utah, where they had been buying all their meats. You can not only tell the difference in the taste, but since I think in addition to the meat reduction, the fact that that's been the meat that I have been eating that doesn't have all of these chemicals and hormones, I think also adds to the at least perceived better health feelings that I've had with the meat that I have still consumed. But yeah, for me, it's like it's there's so many things to it. We're omnivores. That's the way we grew up. That's the way we evolved. I don't think, you know, I don't think most people see animals eating other animals, you know, a lion out hunting a gazelle, or the case, as being evil. And I don't think necessarily, in fact, I don't think for the most part that people eating other animals would be perceived as evil by most people. Even, and I can't speak for anybody or for you, even for vegans, because it's something that for those of us that aren't vegan out there, that's the norm. That's what has been part of human culture and human evolution for a long, long time. There are religions out there. I made this a point for one of my talking points. There are some religions that do advocate, you know, either veganism or nonviolence, and that extends to animals as well. Nonviolence is a big deal in Hinduism, and that extends to animals. Buddhists actually, you know, if you're going to be Buddhist, they're very, you know, they're very much on the same page that vegans are, treating animals as you would any other being, including a human. But I don't see the consumption of meat itself as being a bad thing, and and slaughtering the animals, because I don't see it as any different than as an animal, another predatory animal, slaughtering other animals. So that right there would be like the big difference, I think, in our viewpoints when it comes to, you know, specifically the slaughtering of animals. So, you know, and if you wanted to, you know, ask me some questions to like further expound upon all that, I'm up for that.
Okay, so I wrote down your major points, but the biggest one seemed to be that humans are omnivores and it's natural to eat animals.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, I'd say that sounds right. It's just it's the way we evolved. You know, it's part of nature, I guess.
So, if something is natural, is it automatically good or morally acceptable?
I think nature, to a certain extent, nature itself, I don't think has morals. Morals are a human invention, if that would be the right word. Because I don't think that other people would say that other animals have morals. We're all species, humans among them, are unique, and I think that's the one thing that would make us unique. Because, for example, as predators, you know, without the tools, without the technology that we have, we wouldn't stand, you know, put me in a room with an angry gorilla or a hungry lion, and, you know, I'm not the one that comes out of that situation alive. So it's,
I think put you in the room with a cow and you probably still wouldn't be the one that comes out of that fight.
if the cow were angry, yes. I mean, the cow wanted to push me up against the wall, or what am I going to do? It outweighs me by several hundred pounds. So I'm sorry, go. Yeah, just
okay. Well, So you're just saying morals are a human invention, and nature doesn't really care about morals because that's something that we've come up with. I don't really see how that makes your justification make any sense, because you said humans naturally kill other animals and eat them. That's how we've evolved. But humans naturally were raping each other, and humans have naturally killed each other all the time, just over territory or just out of anger. But none of those things. I don't imagine if I, get angry at my neighbor, I can kill him and you won't have a problem with that.
Well, so for example, I mean, you and I have grown up in what would be described as Western culture. So here, and for example, in the United States, your wife, Froggy, she can go out in public dressed pretty much however she wants, as long as she's wearing something, I suppose. And for the most part, people don't have a problem with that. Even if she was wearing something particularly revealing, well, some people might raise an eyebrow. It's not going to get her arrested, right? But in other societies, and I'm not bashing on Eastern cultures, but, it's something that comes up in the news a lot. A woman can't go out without cover. And for example, if she were to be raped, regardless of the reason, it's generally considered her fault. It's the woman's fault. She did something to entice that person to act as they did in raping her. And so, where you and I live here in the United States, while we might think, and most people in the United States might think that's abhorrent, in their culture, that's normal. And something as seemingly innocent as kissing in public might be seen as a great offense, is seen as a great offense in other cultures. So it really is manufactured. Now, you're asking me, of course, personally, would I think it's right for anybody to rape anybody, woman or otherwise? Well, no. If I grew up in that,
but it's natural. Other animals rape each other.
Oh yeah, there's a wide variety of behaviors out there that appear in nature. For example, homosexuality.
Why do you take killing other animals as the one that you think is okay because it's natural, but not raping or not killing and other things that you think are terrible?
It's strictly a personal thing. That's the thing. When it comes to morals, people can have very different things. And once you've decided on what your beliefs are, you don't need to justify to yourself, or for that matter, anyone, what those beliefs are and what those actions are going to be. Now, of course, some people, I'm sure out there, maybe sociopaths, might actually have in their mind what is a moral and justifiable reason to kill somebody. And no matter what you tell them, no matter how you might try to change their mind, you couldn't, until the day they die, they're going to hold on to that belief. So yeah, if somebody believes that, rape or killing or something that a lot of people might consider as something bad, if they in their mind have some justification for it, I think it would take a lot to change that, but I don't think that anybody is obligated to explain or provide reasoning to anybody for what their belief systems are. Because if that were the case, then we probably all would have settled on like this one common ground, and we wouldn't be fighting over it. We wouldn't be killing each other over it. So it's, again, regardless of whether we are considered logical and reasonable creatures or not, because I do think that's what makes us unique, as the dominant species on this planet, the majority of the people are going to do what they want, because they're going to be the ones that set the rules, or in particular case saying, well, this particular thing like killing animals is not against the rules. And I think we even, like, while we might say, oh, a lot of people think that killing other people is bad, I don't think that's true, because we'll make up reasons. If we don't already have reasons to kill other people, such as, well, they attacked us first, or they're threatening us, people will make up those reasons. I mean, the same reasons that you like mentioned for slavery, just because they look different, or because they have a different religion or from a different culture. So as much as I think as humans that we might like to think we're above that, I'm not trying to bash on religion, but I hear so many Christians talk about, their Christian values. But it really, when it comes down to it, if you really analyze their actions and what they do, those protections only apply to people that have those same beliefs. So somebody from another religion, it's okay to kill them because they don't believe in the same God that we do. In the end, when I talk about nature, it is human nature. We are predators. We were born that way. And while logically we can come up with, reasons or morals or whatever you might want to call them to not live that way and come up with alternatives, you're fighting against that nature. But even then, even setting that aside, it's just a matter of what a person wants to do, because that's what they're going to do. Here's an example, okay, and then I'll let you go from here because I've already taken a lot of time. So, let's say there's a person at a market that's buying meat, right? And I walk up to them, and there's other people around too. They can hear this conversation. So I walk up to them and I say, "Oh man, that would look really good on these ribs. Like, what kind of sauce are you going to use?" And we could probably get into a conversation where we're both, enthusiastically talking about meat, and he's going to go on and buy that product. Now, if you or someone with your beliefs were to approach them and, start a conversation with something like, "So, do you actually know where that meat comes from? Do you know what happens to those animals, and what it took and what they went through for you to get that meat that you're considering buying?" At that moment, you might be able to convince them, you might be able to get them to walk out of that market without purchasing that meat. But I think one of the big reasons that would happen is because they're more concerned about the other people around them. So these other people have just heard them being told about how, you might be doing something bad if you actually buy and prepare this meat. So as to not to look bad in front of other people, they might walk away and then either wait till you're gone or just the next time they come back to the market, buy it again. It's not even a stopgap measure. Why? Because that's what they want and that's what they're going to do. Anyway, to you.
Okay, so you said people don't have to justify their beliefs. And I'm not asking anyone to justify their beliefs. Frankly, you can believe whatever the heck you want. You can believe there's a magic flying spaghetti monster orbiting Jupiter that rules over the world, for all I care. What I care about are your actions. I'm not just talking to you specifically, OP, but the viewers as well. Actions. And I think the point of morals and using logic to work out morals is to figure out which actions are acceptable and which aren't. And you said other societies think it's okay to rape women, and even if a woman gets raped, it's her fault. And some societies probably still think slavery is okay. But that doesn't make it right, and I think we should use moral and logical reasoning to figure out that it's not right. And obviously they haven't just yet, or maybe they don't give a shit. But I think it's, I don't know, I think it's a perfectly good thing to do to discuss issues of the time. Like, if this were 100 years ago, would you be saying, some people believe women should have the right to vote, some people believe they shouldn't? It's been this way forever. Men have always been dominant, and you don't have to justify whether you believe women should be able to vote or not. That's up to you. And hey, other societies let women vote. Some societies don't. Ours doesn't. Who cares? Or would you actually try to figure out which way it should go?
Well, that's what the thing is. That's what I think everybody is doing. For example, when we talk about some of these societies where women are treated differently, a lot of that has to do with religion. It is a mandate by their God, by their deity, that this is the way things are. So for you or I or anybody to come in and tell them, no, that's not right. You're not just expressing a difference of opinion. You're undermining their entire belief system, the reason for their existence and what comes afterwards. So in their mind, they are absolutely right, and you're not only wrong, but you're wrong to the point where that might be their justification for wanting kill you because you're going against their word for their God. So, different societies, different cultures are going to have different ideas of what is right or wrong, or what they can be indifferent to as well, some sort of middle ground.
Okay, I don't think you really answered what I was trying to ask you there.
Okay.
There will be people, I don't know which specific countries we should talk about, but let's just imagine Bobland. All the women are oppressed.
Okay.
And you can imagine whatever religion you like over there. And some people over there think, probably most of the women, think that women should have the same rights as men. And some people over there, probably the people in power, think that they shouldn't. You don't think they should have to justify their decisions with logic and morality?
Well, that was my point. They have them. They are justifying what they're.
They have a religious book that says stuff, but whatever your religious book says, or whatever you believe, because you're not religious as far as I'm aware, OP.
Right.
So you're not saying a religion dictates this to you. You have to justify it with logic. Logic doesn't change no matter what religion you have. And if your only justification is this book says that it's okay, or my God says that it's okay, then by logic, you have to prove that the book is correct, or that the God is correct and exists and all that kind of stuff. So it just doesn't work to justify anything. If you say people justify things with religion, might as well just not argue over anything, because you could literally justify anything with a religion. That's the point of discussing it logically and having morals.
Yeah, I would agree that, I would agree it would be great if we could approach every imaginable topic for debate with logic. But as humans, we have the ability, and it's certainly true for animals, at least to some degree, we have the ability to approach things logically, and then we have the ability to approach things emotionally. And in some cases, I don't think, when it comes down to it, logic is binary. It's 1 or 0. We eventually narrow things down to, this or that. And when it comes to our belief systems, our morals, which is what you're talking about as what we eventually need to apply logic to, I don't know that you can apply logic to that situation. While it's certainly, to you and I, it would feel wrong for practically any reason to kill somebody. I mean, even if they were trying to kill you, I would think you and I would first try to run away before we got trapped in a situation where we have to fight and we might kill this person. But I don't think that in some of these cases you can apply logic, because they're completely subjective things. I mean, again, going back to when it comes to an animal killing an animal, I mean, the only logic that really applies is, does the animal need to eat? Yes. And then from there, you can determine, how does it eat? Where does it eat and why does it eat? But
perfectly justifiable through logic. A lion kills a gazelle, and that is morally acceptable because the lion must kill the gazelle to survive. I think if two humans are stuck on a desert island and one of them has to eat the other one to survive, then it becomes morally acceptable to cannibalize the person. But if people thought cannibalism, I don't know, eating each other was perfectly acceptable in a society where you didn't have to, we'd use logic to figure out that no, if you don't need to eat someone, then it's not okay to do so. And if you must eat someone, then it is okay. Lions must kill gazelle and other animals to survive. Humans in modern society have no need, most of the time, to eat animals to survive.
But lions aren't thinking about that. They're not applying logic or moral, right? So whereas we can, and the kind of the suggestion or the sample that you use when you talk to cannibalism, that has happened in a situation that you described. It was that movie Alive. The soccer team's plane crashed. So I'm sure there are people out there that, as horrific as they might think cannibalism is, especially if it's something that you practice freely, they might say, okay, yes, it was horrible, but in that one situation, I'm okay with, I forgive them or whatever. It was okay for those people to have eaten. They
probably weren't put in jail.
They're dead commons. Oh, I doubt it. But there would there would still be those people that would say no, no matter what is wrong, that, because a lot of people, especially when it comes to religious views, but even people that aren't religious, they definitely elevate human beings, not only above all other animals, but over all things in the universe. To a lot of people, humans are the center of the universe. A lot of religious beliefs, say that to a certain extent, the universe isn't real. It's just all a light show, until we die and go to heaven or whatever the case may be. So there would definitely be people out there would say no, no matter how dire those circumstances were, that still doesn't justify eating another human being. And for a lot of cases, it's and to them, that's logical. To them, it's just not right for a human to eat another human. That to them is
saying something is just not right isn't logical. Whether they think it's logical or not, it's simply not logical. You have to be able to justify why it's not right or why it is right. And that's why I explained how you, if you want to treat two things differently, you have to identify differences between those things that justify the difference in treatment, like the rock and the dog, where one is not sentient and therefore it's okay to kick it. So you said you would love to tackle everything logically, so why don't we tackle unnecessarily killing animals for food preference logically?
That's I think where we have a big difference then, because in some cases I don't think you can apply logic. In some cases I think it is purely a feeling. It's purely a belief that there's no either precedent or nothing where you can point out and say it's right and wrong to base it on, because people do have those ideas. When you're talking about morals, again, I stand by the idea that it's strictly a human thing where logic may not apply.
Morals are strictly a human thing, but we have to use logic to justify them and figure out what's right. I don't know what you're trying to say. This is how I feel, and my morals are my own, so whatever, it's okay. So, people raping women in societies where women are subjugated, that's totally okay, and you don't have a problem with that?
It happens. Obviously,
it happens, but that doesn't make it right. That's the point of morals, to figure out what's right. What's okay.
That's where people are going to disagree. They can
disagree, but they have to justify that disagreement with logic to prove that they're right.
They don't. I could go out and just shoot a guy.
You could do something, but that wouldn't make it right. That's the morals are what's right and wrong, not what you can and can't do. And you have to justify it logically to prove that it's right or wrong.
I could come up with justification for it.
What justification? That's what I'm asking you. Okay, let's get back to
anything.
it, OP. Okay. So what difference between humans and animals justifies unnecessarily killing animals but not humans? What difference?
Well, now we have a difference of what's unnecessary, because
unnecessary, not needed. Do you need to eat animals?
Well, as you talked about before, first of all, some people may need to, but
do you?
Well, here's the thing: if I like to eat animals, which I obviously do, I'm going to. So would I absolutely need to?
But it's not necessary because you like it. I like to rape. Raping is now necessary. Is it necessary, OP?
Well, the thing is, I'm not going out to rape somebody. So there's obviously,
to kill animals.
But here's the big difference. You believe it's wrong to kill animals, and I don't.
You haven't answered the question. Is it necessary?
So let's just say, for the sake of argument, no. Let's say that if I went on I went on a completely vegan diet, I would be perfectly okay.
Thank you.
Right. Okay.
Okay. So what difference between humans and animals justifies unnecessarily killing animals for food preference, but not humans? Because I'm assuming you don't think it's okay to kill humans just because you like them.
Just because I dislike them, I guess.
Well, like how they taste is what it meant, or the texture, whatever you like.
See, these are things that I don't think are just like simple yes and no answers. So, for example, again, in the society where I was raised, I'm surrounded by the idea, even though there are then contradictions, but that it is wrong to kill people. And then, of course, for all of my life, like you as well, and probably most people here, some people were probably raised vegan or in religions, but it's generally the cultural norm that yes, you can go, animals and other things, and even the way they're treated. A lot of people wouldn't even have a problem with the way these industrial raised animals for meat are treated and so forth. And they wouldn't necessarily have a problem with it, even if they're aware of it. Again, I think it just comes down to the fact that we're not going to be able to agree that you have to have logic. Yes, in situations where it can be applied.
You don't have to justify your actions.
I don't think anybody does. People will. So they will. They gladly will, but they'll tell you why they do certain things. But
if you want to say something is okay, then you do have to justify it. If you're willing to admit that killing animals is wrong and you're just going to do it anyway, then you don't have to justify anything. We're in a society where you can do that. Mm-hmm. But if you want to say that it's okay to do it, morally acceptable, then you have to justify it.
I would just disagree.
Raping is fine. I think raping is fine. I'm just going to go and rape people, and I don't have to justify that.
Well, the thing is, some people...
I've said that rape is fine, and now everybody just has to believe me that rape is fine.
But the thing is, most people,
So the popular opinion defines what's right and wrong? Back when slavery was okay, slavery was okay? Like, when people thought it was okay, it was okay. They weren't doing anything wrong.
As a more recent example, even... we are part of a generation. We're just like really one generation removed, maybe two at the most, where, slavery was the norm. And certainly for me, I'm just one generation removed from the civil rights movement, where, here in the United States, a black person was in no way equal to a white person before they even had some rights similar to what white people have. They were considered like a third of a person. I mean, you're probably familiar with that if you've had a chance to follow up on American history. So over time, those things change. So I think it's possible, although to me it seems improbable, that society's views on specifically the killing of animals will change anytime soon. Now, it could happen, and I can even imagine some scenarios, like, for example, some sort of disease that's spreading through animals, and then that's a vector for that disease transferring to humans, where people say, where we like where we have
the 15 top killers in the developed world, all being from consuming animal products and processed foods.
I'm talking something more extreme, though. I'm talking, because that's an over time thing.
More extreme than having your chest cut open? Nah.
Well,
but I get what you mean, an immediate infection that kills...
Something
2 hours after you eat a burger,
something like that. Because you could show somebody can go to their doctor and you can show them that how their lifestyle changes are like slowly and negatively affecting them. And for a lot of people, that's not going to be an impetus to do anything, because that's a problem for later. That's a problem for later down the line. Whereas if you can say, oh, this will kill you in a month or a week, then maybe that will prompt them to action. So I don't see anything happening anytime soon, not within our lifetimes, that would cause people to change their views about killing animals, or for that matter, even killing each other. And I don't know how that change would come about. Now, if somehow veganism were to really spread, really catch on, and a lot of people started adopting it for whatever reason, and that just made the world a better place for humans and animals involved, and if it meant passing laws saying, okay, it's now illegal to kill animals for any reason other than they're attacking you, I personally would be okay with that. It's if it did happen in my lifetime, I probably wouldn't necessarily be happy about it. But if it meant overall improvements, because we haven't talked on this yet, for life as a whole, because if we know, of course, this industry helps to destroy our planet, that would be fine. That would be great. But when it actually comes to the killing of animals, I mean, I just from a down, just down in the gut feeling type of sense, it's not something that, I perceive as being wrong in any way, whether it's, whatever sense, moral, reasonably, logically, whatever type of way you might want to describe that.
You haven't explained how logically you think it's okay.
It may not be a logical thing.
That it's not okay.
Well, I honestly don't think that when you're talking about animals that are the free range animals, not these industrial ones, I don't think it's wrong to eat animals, to kill them. And
so if you treat an animal nicely in life, it's okay to kill it unnecessarily for taste preference.
Yeah, I would say yes for meat consumption. Yes.
If you treat a human nicely, is it okay to kill them unnecessarily for taste preference?
But I don't want to kill humans or eat them for taste preference. Again, Nicholas, we're talking about very personal things for people, things to which, as much as you may feel that somebody needs to justify something, they don't have to.
Nobody has to do anything.
Right.
Nobody has to wake up in the morning. They can just lie in bed until they die. We're not talking about what people have to do. We're talking about what people should do. They should have to justify their actions. The countries where women are still subjugated should have to justify their actions. And if they were forced to justify their different treatment of women, they would have to come up with some logical difference between men and women that justifies treating women differently. They wouldn't be able to do it. So if they were forced to do that, hey presto, they would have to either admit that they're bastards or start treating women properly. But you just think it's not worth discussing moral values of the day. This is just the way things are, or nobody has to justify anything.
No, not at all.
Justify it. But that's the point of this conversation.
The point is, or the point I'm making is that nobody's ever going to agree on their morals, at least not right now. Nobody's ever going to agree on
I agree with
what is right on wrong. Yeah, and
do you agree that it's wrong to rape women, OP?
I believe that it's wrong to rape women,
we agree on something about
or anybody for that matter, really. Men too.
We probably don't agree on everything, but I'm arguing with you about your treatment of animals because there are animal victims involved. I don't care what your views are on black people because you're not doing anything to black people. I don't care what your views are on women because you're not doing anything to women. But you're paying people to kill animals unnecessarily, and so most of the people in the world, especially in developed countries. So that's what I'm trying to talk about. Can you justify it logically? You just feel that it's okay. Can you justify why raping women is not okay?
Well,
why raping women would be okay?
Here's a logical reason. I don't think it's unhealthy to have meat in your diet.
Is it unhealthy to eat a little bit of a human? Just a little bit of human. I'm just going to kill one person and eat them. Is that going to hurt me over my lifetime? Probably not.
No.
But it's still wrong. So that's not a justification. Next one, please.
I mean, I don't know if we're going to ever find common ground on this, but to get back to it.
You're not even probably trying to justify your moral position. You just say, I don't need to justify it.
Well,
if you don't have a justification for your moral position, you're just admitting that it's wrong.
No,
no. That's just the way I feel. Well, if somebody feels that raping women is wrong, then it must be right. If you want, then it must be right.
If you want what I would call a logical reason, it's natural. It is natural.
It's natural, and it's natural to rape. So it's not a justification. Doesn't work. It's not a logical justification if it doesn't actually work.
I don't think we're going to find a common point on that. I think we're just coming from two very.
You don't think that makes you okay? You think killing animals is natural, therefore it's okay. Raping women is natural, but it's not okay. Why doesn't it being natural justify raping women when it justifies eating animals?
But it's not okay to me. It is okay not just to other individuals, but to other cultures. Again, these are things where you can't necessarily apply logic. Humans are going to do what they're going to do.
You can't apply logic because you don't have any logical backing to this moral value. That's why.
Do I need any. I mean, what would be stopping me from doing this? What would be stopping me from
stopping you?
Right. And nobody can really convince me.
You could go eventually out and kill a classroom full of children and nothing would stop you.
Yeah.
If you eventually do it. But that doesn't make it right. We're talking about what's right and wrong, not what's possible.
I don't think killing animals is wrong. Especially for meat consumption.
I'm asking you for a justification. Why is it not wrong? You just say it's natural. And I explained to you why it being natural isn't a good justification. To
you, it's not a good justification.
It's not a logical justification.
Meat and other animal products, as well as their other products like leather.
You're just setting a double standard, OP. It's a double standard. You're saying A is good or okay because it's natural. B is not okay, even though it's natural. What's the difference? There could be you could say, even though B is natural, it's not okay. But that would mean that just being natural doesn't justify something.
Again, It's all going to come down to a matter of a
It's
person's
not
personal
logical.
perspective.
I'm talking about
It doesn't
logic
have
here,
to
and you're
be.
saying it's perfectly logical to say that something being natural is good, but something else being natural is bad in spite of that.
How much in any society or culture is logical?
Who cares? If things were actually logical, we'd get somewhere. But they're not logical. I'm not trying to say all of society is always logical. All I'm saying is we have a moral difference. Most people are on your side on this matter. Can you justify your position? You say, oh, it's logical. Oh, I don't need to justify it.
I don't. But
No,
what I would go with, if you want the closest thing to the logic, it's what I've already given you, and I choose not to go out and rape women or kill a person or eat a person, for that matter, for my own personal reasons, and other things that I do. Just the fact that I'm not religious, a lot of people would really have some issues with that, and whether or not they want to, debate that with me or let me go about my own way of life, or kill me because of my differences, that's up to them. And we probably would not be able to
them, but that doesn't make it right. They can choose to do it, and they can believe that it's right, but that doesn't make it right.
I think as humans, we define our own morality. I think what you believe in your mind is right is going to be right to you, and that's why
you're going to believe what you believe. Therefore, you can just say, "But
yeah, that's what people do. That's what they do. That's
think
what
there's any point in morals that apply to everyone."
Well, this is what, and I mentioned this as one of the things I kind of wanted to bring up when it comes to changing people's mind about pretty much anything, not just veganism. I think, from my experience, you have to convince people that there's something in it for them. Not about saving the environment or saving animals or anything that has any impact on them other than themselves, other than that person. That I think is part of human nature. And if you can get a foothold in there some way, then maybe you have a chance. But you can also, you can present people with mountains of evidence, and you could maybe even say that the particular case here, showing them that something would be better if you did it a different way or didn't do it. And they'll just I don't know, best way to put it, they'll reject it. They'll crawl in their shell, no, I can't hear you type of thing. That is human nature. I may certainly be as fallible to that type of thing as anybody else, but I can't think of a reason to logically, to me, I can't think of a reason logically or otherwise where I would say, oh, okay, because of that, it's wrong to kill animals. I can't.
I'm asking you to justify why it's... do you not understand the basis of this logic? To treat two things differently, yes, and justify it morally, to say it is right to kick or okay to kick rocks, but not okay to kick dogs. Okay, you have to be able to identify differences between those two things to be able to justify a difference in treatment. There's a clear difference between a rock and a dog, that the rock is not sentient. But you don't know any differences between humans and animals that justifies killing animals unnecessarily, because there are none. Cows have spots. Cows can't talk. Cows have hooves. If a human had hooves, spots, and couldn't talk, say they were severely physically and mentally retarded, that wouldn't make it okay to kill them just because they taste good.
Well, maybe I would be. Think
maybe you would think so,
this,
but I don't think most people would.
No, maybe I would be what you'd call,
apathetic?
For lack of a better word. No, that's not where I was going. I don't know what the right word for it is, even though I'm sure I was. But it's what I mentioned earlier when I say that I don't see us like being that completely different than animals. Our minds are what make us unique. The ability to have abstract thought are what make us unique. And there are other things that make other animals unique, whether it's they can fly or they live underwater, things like that. But
does the ability to think abstractly, or in other ways, an animal's inability to think abstractly, justify killing it unnecessarily?
That wouldn't be the justification.
No.
The justification is that we are animals just like they are, and while we might like to think that we're better than them, the fact is that I don't think we ever are. I mean, you'd have to go. You could even make the argument that the beginning of agriculture was the beginning of all of this. Because that led to human explosion. We've got 7 billion people on this planet, and among other things, that creates any other number of problems. And it's hard to, we've gone past several points. We've got past several points of no return where we can't change things. And now, so of course, yes, can we, and even should we change at the very least? I think the one thing we agree upon, like this whole industrial farming thing and other things which bring up problems with global warming, the environment, yes. But is that... Go ahead.
You just go off on such massive tangents, but you think, okay, Obi, you think
I only do that really. I only do that because there are several factors that play into this. We haven't even touched upon.
I put this to you very simply, and you just go off on massive tangents and say, "Oh, well, I don't need to justify anything." Obi, do you think it's wrong to breed an animal and keep it in a cage its whole life, which would be for a chicken about 6 weeks before it's killed for meat? For other animals, it's up to like 2 years, although for dairy cows, it's more like 6 years. Do you think it's okay to breed an animal, imprison it its entire life, so that it can barely move, and then kill it for taste preference?
No.
But you do think it's okay to breed an animal, give it a field to run around in for the same amount of time, and then kill it unnecessarily for taste preference?
Yes, actually, yes.
Okay, so why is it not okay to keep it in a cage its whole life? And in other ways mistreat it, like chop off its testicles, its beak, and its teeth, and other things to make them easier to handle?
That's where I strongly agree with your use of the word like unnecessarily. When you talk about the unnecessarily killing of animals, in this case, it's the unnecessary, very poor treatment, to put it lightly, of animals. Unless
okay.
I mean, and I would think that even people that aren't aware of how they're treated might have some, concerns if they were to see that, become aware of it. Why specifically? What?
Why is it not okay to treat animals that way? Why do you?
Oh, the living conditions?
Think it's not okay to lock them up in a cage and chop off their horns and their teeth and their balls and just treat them generally terribly?
That's like a very personal thing. That's one of those things where if you see it and experience it yourself, and as I've mentioned, I've seen this because I live near a slaughterhouse, it can change your views on those types of things.
So it's just very much a... You just feel like you don't like it.
Oh, well, I know that I don't like it.
Oh,
right?
Okay, but
right.
You don't like it because it makes you feel bad, or because it's
no. Well, there is.
Yeah,
because we talked about it. Animals do have emotions, and how they may be able to articulate it, but they do feel fear and like anxiety and pain, and we all, even if we experience those things short term, I don't think anybody would want to live that way long term, and they wouldn't want anybody that they loved or cared about to be exposed to those types of conditions long term. Oh, by the way, that brings me up another question, but I don't know if we'll have time to get to that. But yeah, people would describe it as inhumane. So when it comes to that, and then your question where it says, okay, so imagine they don't live in those conditions, but in the end, you end up slaughtering them for food and or other products. I don't know if there's any way. I don't think there's any way to kill an animal without pain, or at least not without doing so that you're not pumping them up with some chemical that might affect what's in the meat. But no, I don't have a problem with that. And if you're asking me to justify that, or what I feel about it, or what my logic behind that is, I'm just going to say it's one of those. I don't think it's one of those issues, again, where I've said before, where the logic really applies. In the end, as individual societies, we get to decide what we're going to do.
Don't you see why it's necessary for people to justify their morals logically?
Well, we would
If
want
people had to justify their morals logically, slavery wouldn't have existed. If people had to justify their morals logically, subjugation of women wouldn't have existed. If people had to justify their morals logically, black people wouldn't have been subjugated either.
where they come into play. Where
there's a point to that?
Yeah, the point is being able to live together. You know, when
it's just practical reason.
Well, I don't know if you'd call it practical or not, because the decisions that people may make on as a whole may not necessarily be what's best for them. But in order to be able to live together, we have to have some common ground. So here in the U.S., and in other countries, we have various laws saying, this is okay and this is not. So there's some sort of common ground where we can live together without it devolving into chaos. And I think that's human nature, because we evolved, not talking about the whole meat thing, but as these tribes, as these little groups of people that were trying to stick together to survive. And I think that's just ingrained in us. If we weren't able to communicate and come upon some common ground, I think we still might be at that point, which I don't even know if that's necessarily a bad thing, because I think the human population would be smaller. We would have had less of an impact on the environment. But right now, with what we have and the tools we have, I mean, we wouldn't be having this discussion right now, because we would have annihilated ourselves sometime after the dawn of the nuclear age.
Okay, so you do see a point in having to justify morals logically.
No, not logically. No. Just so you can live together, having some sort of thing to agree upon. Because again, those things you agree upon. We could
have all just agreed that black people all deserve to die, and we could have bombed them all. Would that be so good?
Well, so first of all, would it be good?
It wouldn't be good for the black people. No, it wouldn't be good. But having to justify morals logically always produces the correct outcome.
Different, not to go off topic here, but how we present these ideas and how we talk about them, I think, are the key. And it's good and healthy to have debate and even disagreement. But in the end, because people are going to disagree, no matter what the subject or topic is, if we don't come to that common ground, we're going to kill each other. We're going to destroy each other. You and I, if we were in the same room, of course, it would never occur to one of us to like stand up and throttle the other guy or something like that. But to some people, that might be their reaction. I've seen it. I don't know if you have. I have, in several cases, seen arguments that have devolved into one person trying to hurt, if not necessarily kill the other, all because they just can't agree on, things like what movie to watch, or, oh, I accidentally, grazed your arm while we were passing in the street, so I feel offended and I feel some need to hit you. So, if I can't, to your satisfaction, logically explain why it's okay to raise the animal humanely, but then still kill them, then I don't think that's ever going to happen. And I don't think
didn't even justify why it's not okay to raise the animal inhumanely.
Well, the reason I bring that up is to be able to get to the point where we can move forward and say, okay, so what is some common ground that we do have where we can move forward to have some basic agreement on, so that we're willing to work together and talk and, and then maybe actually like have a complete agreement or some goal that we're working together that we both agree is beneficial to what we both want. Again, other people are going to reject that. That's the reason I wanted to have this conversation, is simply because, because I do want to talk on it, because this is a personal thing to me, and it may be for a lot of people. So global warming,
personal for almost everyone.
But this isn't the food specifically. Global warming, it's real. Global warming is real, and if you weren't aware of that, it's industry. Humans, global warming does, there are cycles of like ice ages, and so we're probably naturally starting to enter into that, but it's being greatly accelerated and in ways that are going to be detrimental to humanity due to the things we do. And a big part of that is industry. So you probably all can imagine that things like, energy production when it comes to coal and things have their negative impact on the environment. So I don't know if you're not aware that the food industry and not just animals, agriculture as a whole, but specifically meat production has a severely negative impact on the environment. And while Nicholas would probably have more data than I do on the subject, just imagine what's involved in producing that meat. You have your factories that have emissions where the animals are slaughtered while the animals are being raised. Because you mentioned chickens being 6 months, pigs like 2 years, cows, whatever it was.
6 weeks.
6 weeks. What did I say? 6 months? 6 weeks. Okay. Obviously longer for pigs and cows. So the resources when it comes to their feed and water that it takes to raise them before they're slaughtered is significant, to say the least. And then, of course, meat is transported and it's kept refrigerated or frozen, all of which are things that contribute to negative environmental impact, including global warming. Oh, and also the emissions from cows, their methane gas, right? That's a factor. To what degree exactly, I don't know, but
it's like 25 to 80 times more powerful a greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. It depends on how long it's been in the atmosphere.
Okay.
Over a time period.
So the point is, without going into super details, the point is that for me, what we can do to reduce those emissions, or at least reduce our impact when it comes to those emissions, depletion of the ozone layer, the greenhouse gases, and overall global warming, it's going to be something that I think is going to be like, before Nicholas dies, I'm going to die before him, but before he dies, I think he, and his family and friends and other people his age and their kids and so on, they're going to start to see the negative impact on that. And I'd like to try to do something to say, hey, we can change this, whether it's not too late. I have no idea, but that's at least worth trying. And for that reason, not for the animal killing or lack thereof, at least the reduction of the consumption of meat, not providing the type of demand that drives that industry and makes it as big as it is, to me is a worthwhile cause. Doesn't tie in necessarily to how animals are treated, but the end result would be that at the very least there would be less of what somebody that's vegan or otherwise cares about animals would have some objections to. That, I think, would be one thing that you might be able to get people to get on board with, coupled with another couple of things, even if they don't care about animals. Health benefits, impact on the environment. Let's start there and see where it goes, that type of thing.
Okay. Well, very simple reasoning to help people understand how much of an impact animal agriculture has on the environment. Growing plant foods, then feeding those plants to animals, then eating the animals, obviously loses some of the original calories from the plants. So no matter what, if you're eating an animal that had to eat plants, you're having to produce more calories than what you're getting by eating it. So all of the environmental damage that could be produced by producing plants is multiplied by some amount by eating animals instead. It varies based on the species, but in general, you lose about 90% of the calories by feeding them to an animal first and then eating the animal's corpse. So a single meal where you eat animal products instead of plant foods could have like 10 times the environmental destruction as the same meal made out of plants. Except that they also produce, that's just the amount of food you have to produce. Except they also have to do lots of poops. If you've seen aerial views of industrial pig farms, the massive lakes of poop that they have are like 3 times the size of just the shed where they keep the pigs. Okay, they're destroying rivers and fresh water. They use up ridiculous amounts of water. They produce greenhouse gases, more than the entire transportation industry. And that's the most conservative estimate, is 18% of greenhouse gas emissions are from animal agriculture, when transportation is less than 15%. Some estimates go up to 51%, but it's somewhere between 18 and 51%. You can say it's 18% if you just want to take the conservative minimum. There are 160 billion land animals raised and killed every year in the world. Obviously, some of them poop more than humans, like the cows. Some of them poop less than the chickens, and they don't live the entire year in the case of the chickens. But just imagine how much poop that is if you think there are 7 billion humans on the world pooping, and all that just basically goes into the ocean. There are 160 billion animals also pooping that don't need to be there. That's creating oceanic dead zones, massive zones of the ocean where the water is way too acidic. It destroys all the plants and all the animals that live there. You might have heard this fun statistic. Since 1950, more than 90% of all fish in the ocean have been destroyed. Fishing is completely unsustainable. More than 1 trillion fish per year are killed in commercial fishing, and at least 1/5 of that is just bycatch. Oops, we accidentally caught dolphins in our net. They're dead now, but we're just going to toss them back into the sea because we can't sell the meat. If that doesn't convince you not to eat animals, I don't know what the hell won't, if you care about the environment. But in OP's case, obviously that doesn't, because he just thinks it's okay to reduce it. But eating free-range animals takes up more space. They produce more methane because they're digesting grass instead of corn and soybeans. And all that space they're polluting instead of producing plant foods or just letting return to wild land or whatever. All that space has to be cleared. All the Amazon rainforest, let me see. I've got some of it written down here. Yeah, I just said most of the deforestation on Earth is either to make grazing land for animals or to grow feed crops for the animals. About 50% of the crop foods in the world go to feeding animals. So let's say we take all 160 billion land animals per year, because obviously they're not feeding most of the fish, they just catch them. Stop feeding all of them, stop breeding them. We now have double the crops we've been eating. You don't need all of those to replace the meat because you're losing 90% of the calories from those crops. So we've just solved world hunger. Why do people still eat meat when they care about world hunger, when they care about environmental damage?
Well, I can tell you why, where part of the problem would come from. And again, it has to do with this massive population of 7 billion people. Regardless of the source of the food, having enough food to feed people has actually never been a problem, as far as I'm aware. Whether it's meat, plant-based, a mix of the two, it's the distribution system. Because again, you talked about how
the distribution system where they take 50% of the world's crops, a lot of those from poor countries, buy them into America to feed to American cows and then feed those to Americans. If Americans didn't buy them, they'd have plenty of land to produce crops for themselves in those poor countries.
Well, it's the same type of thing, but applying to humans in this case, in that to get well, and I think it's kind of the opposite of what you said, because you talked about these poor countries where they do have this room to grow their crops. So the opposite issue is here in industrialized areas, even in some areas that are not rural, but not necessarily urban. Getting that plant-based food is going to be one of the issues. That's going to replace some of the carbon emissions that we're going to reduce by reducing or even eliminating the industrial farms that kill animals. Now, to the degree, is it going to reduce it by the degree that's eliminated? No, I don't think so, and I would certainly hope not. But that's one of the issues that you do actually face when trying to get somebody to try these other foods, because where I live, we don't actually have a lot of those resources available close by. So they have to be trucked in, which means it's more expensive. So when I go to some place or when I go to my market to try to buy something, whether it's just plain vegetables or like a pre-made meal that's vegan that I can heat up or something like that, it tends to be much more expensive than, of course, the cheaper industrial produced meat that, pumped up with all these chemicals. So that's another issue that we'd have to find a solution to, because that alone,
I've got
money.
The solution.
Okay.
Buy rice and beans and potatoes and corn, the cheap foods that poor people eat. Don't buy ready-made meals.
Yes, but then, well, that's that's the logical solution, of course. Then, but the thing is, then you have to sell people on, at least until, you know, other resources become available where other varieties of foods are available and at lower prices. Getting them to just subsist on those things, you're going to come across a lot of objections. Again, that's one of the points I wanted to bring up that we've touched on a bit, but getting people just to try something, again, you have to get them to believe that there's something in it for them. So, you know, if we've never even
just does everything based on selfish motivations. Nobody ever does anything because they believe it's right.
I think that's right. I don't see altruism in the world. I honestly don't see that much altruism. I see very, like, even if you do something that's considered charitable, right? Like, even if and I've done this at work, you know, they have this thing where during Christmas, you know, you can donate things to needy families, things like that. So obviously they benefit, but I mean, I benefit too, even if it's only
you benefit by feeling good.
Yeah, that's
so. I don't care if people do the right thing for the selfish reason of feeling good. I care what they do, and if they're doing it for the self reason of feeling good, then I can make them feel good about it by saying, "Hey, you're a good person."
Well, but here's the thing. So if I try to go to most of my friends, because I really only, you know, like people that I talk to in real life that I see in person, there's only really 3 that are vegan. So outside of those 3 people, I have a hard time imagining me going to any of those other people and saying, hey, you should just try eating what the things you listed, rice, beans, or a couple other things you listed.
Potatoes, corn, sweet potatoes.
Okay. If I were to try to sell them on the idea that they should try subsisting on those because the health benefits. Well, but that would be the issue. I mean, these are people with families, you know, they're struggling to make ends meet in some case. So, and maybe in some cases that would save them money, but never mind the fact that they might be saving money and they're able to save them family. The fact that they're giving up all those other things, you know, whether they're complete meat products or products that contain animal things, you know, pizza, the cheese and the meat. I don't even know how I would begin to try to sell them on that, because I can tell you right now the whole hey, you know, even, you know, it's good for the environment, you know, what type of world do you want your kids here to grow up in?
You haven't even managed to sell yourself on it, so I can see where the problem is.
Yeah, but well, even like I said, if I approach it logically, if I lay out all the things we did, if I for example just talk about like the environment, if I try my best, even if my heart's not to make an argument about not killing animals, those things alone may not be enough to get them to say, oh, okay, I'll try this, because they're going to feel like they're going to have something taken away from them, something that they like.
I don't know how to convince people to give up things that they like, OP. That's why I prefer to try to get people to justify their morals logically, because if people are forced to justify their morals logically, you always get the good outcome, whether they actually act by their morals or not. They have to either admit that they don't have a logical basis for their immoral actions, like you basically have, or change their actions to suit the correct logical morals.
So let's say let's say you talk to 10 people and you got them to agree with all of your points. And actually, you know, I mean, like really, I mean, they're really feeling it. You know, they've had
they're impassioned.
Yeah, okay, they're impassioned. Thank you. So if that happens, then, you know, then that's where the change will happen. But there's that non-logical part, their personal feelings, their personal beliefs, and other things like maybe their culture and their society that they've been raised in that you're fighting against. Not to mention the idea that I think in this scenario you never would convince maybe any more than 2 out of those 10 people, because as I talked about, regardless of what information you provide them, they're just going to be close to that. So I think part of the issue, and I think it's part of what we're seeing here, is that the more you simply argue about the logic and the need to morally justify the things, the more I think people might be tuning out, just because it's too, I mean, some people don't even like to watch the news. And they definitely, when it comes to bigger issues, you know, things here in the U.S. when it comes to politics, one of the reasons people like vote straight party tickets is because they don't really want to take the time to think about what the actual issues are and face them. And even I can tell you for at least a couple of things, while I'm aware, and these are like local political things, as it's like, do I really want to deal with this? Because in order to do so, in order to like potentially affect a change, I do have to take time to like physically be in places and do things. And, you know, when you talk about all the other things that are competing for time, then you have to prioritize. So, you know, can you get somebody to prioritize making this type of change in their life? And can you get them to even listen? That's what I see a biggest part of the problem. You know, whether it's for me or for somebody else. I don't know what the answer is, because if there was a clear and easy answer, maybe these types of changes would have happened long ago. But I think how you approach things, in addition to the information that you're providing, is going to make or break whether or not the ideals of veganism or any other types of life changes or changes that may overall have a benefit for our planet are ever going to be enacted. Because if I knew, I probably wouldn't be sitting here. I'd probably be out, you know, trying to do something else. But I don't know what that is.
If you or anybody knew how to just convince people of things, that person would be king of the world.
Well,
or could be if they wanted to.
So here's the thing. I could easily, if I thought that I was going, well, that's what I don't know. I guess I'm making the same point. If I thought something in the long run was going to benefit me, even if it was something that I didn't even necessarily understand or agree with, I might be willing to try or change this. But as you're well aware, from some of the points we brought up and others that we haven't covered, there is going to be a lot of resistance, specifically to the ideas of veganism. Because when I talked about, well, I'm not aware of any religions that actually say you have to eat meat, but there is that justification that, you know, animals are here for our purpose to do with whatever we see fit. And I know this because prior to having this discussion, I had to like try to think of some things like, well, what are some of the arguments that people would have actually against veganism? So I was pretty sure that this friend of mine would have this answer, and yes, he did. It's not just a matter of, oh, you know, I like meat. He's really big on meat, but he's very religious, and, you know, to him, animals were put here in part for that purpose and to be used for any other purpose. You know, oxen pulling plows and things like that, the things that are mentioned in the Bible. So that to get somebody to change their religious beliefs, to implement these types of changes, to get behind them, I don't know.
I don't think anybody sincerely believes that animals are just objects to be used purely because of their religion. I think if they really examine their own religion, they'll find that they're just using it as an excuse, because whatever religion it is, I'm sure they could find in their holy book justification for enslaving black people and subjugating women and killing people who don't believe in your God, but you choose not to believe those things, or the beliefs in those things have changed because they're in the Old Testament or whatever. It's the same thing with unnecessarily killing animals for taste preference. Their religion doesn't say they have to do those things. It does. Christianity, for instance, says that you have to stone gay people to death, but it doesn't say you have to kill animals. So saying that animals, the Bible says it's okay to kill animals, is just, you know, a bullshit justification. Oh, my religion says it's all right. I'm not asking people to justify it based on religion. You can justify whatever you want based on religion.
Well, that's not my point, because I agree with you on that point. The point is that because people believe that, because that is their, you know, those are their firmly held beliefs. In most cases, probably since childhood, they believe those things because that's the religion that they were raised in. I don't even think you can get them to listen to them. Or if they do, I mean, they might sit there and nod their head politely. And then when it's over, and probably when you're gone, boy, that guy was crazy.
I think the only people who sincerely base their beliefs entirely on their religion are fundamentalists, and they'll go and blow themselves up or are laughed at by everyone else. I don't know how to convince a fundamentalist not to believe in their religion, and for everyone else who doesn't just believe every single thing in their holy book or doesn't do everything that their holy book says, they're just using it as a justification. It's
Which
not
I think
the basis of their decision to unnecessarily kill animals just for taste preference.
Which I think I agree would be most people because, like, for example, the Bible itself is contradictory. You couldn't possibly live by every precept because at some point they don't match up. It's different in one place. So, but
I think it's pointless to try to convince people that their religion needs to change in any way.
But it's such a big
regarding
thing.
Regarding veganism anyway. It's not the basis of their belief, and they just use it as a justification. So call it what it is, bullshit.
But that's what they'll use. Like I said,
I don't know how to convince people that are just talking bullshit, because they'll just keep talking bullshit, even if you do figure out how to debunk their religion justifies killing animals nonsense. Because they'll just have more nonsense. If they've got one thing of nonsense, they'll have some more.
Again, that's why I think that's the wrong approach. That's why, I mean, it is important to understand, specific and what you would call logical reasons, like all the data that we've just gone over, as the follow-up, maybe, to convincing people. The approach that I've seen, because I mentioned there's these three people that I know, and like one, she's really young. I mean, I know you're young too, but she's actually younger than you. I think she's like 19, and she right now is, I would say, a vegan because, for lack of a better word, she's following what's in her heart. She knows what's in it for animals. When I asked her specifically, like if she, like, I was asking her, for example, what was her impression of the whole like free range versus these animals held in captive thing, and she was like, well, I really haven't read on that. I don't know anything about that. So I didn't really feel like I could get much from her to bring into this discussion. And then one of the other people that I talked to, I would say, you two wouldn't have much to talk about, only because you just would be reinforcing each other's ideas. Nothing new, nothing in disagreement. But then this one other person that's vegan, he's just very, I don't know. I guess in some ways he's like me in that when you ask him, like, specifically, because I was asking, why did you choose to be vegan? And he said, well, that's really personal. I don't feel like I should have to justify the reasons why I do that. And I said, oh, okay, well, that's okay. I mean, if you don't feel comfortable talking about it. And I said, but I mean, I asked him, so do you at least do stuff? Are you active? Do you promote the idea, whether it's through some sort of social media or just friends and family that you do feel comfortable talking about? And he was honestly, he's like, you know what? He's like, I feel that those people, in other words, not vegans, they're not going to make it. Why waste my time? And eventually, the people that should be alive and deserve to live will be the ones that left. So kind of extreme, kind of weird. But the reason I just thought it was strange and worth mentioning is that, first of all, if anybody were to ask him like I did, they might be put off, and they're going to get this impression that, oh, these vegans are really strange and they're really weird. And then secondly, I mean, if he truly believes the things that veganism, teaches, I mean, why would you not want to promote that and talk about that? I mean, because that's the only way the change would happen, right? I don't know.
I think it's very easy as a vegan to get a pessimistic worldview, because it's really, really hard to convince people not to unnecessarily kill animals for taste preference or do anything that they've been doing their entire lives. That's why I think attacking it logically works for a decent amount of people. It worked for me. I had to confront the logic. Apparently, it won't work for you, but I don't know what would work for you, OP, because you don't feel like it's wrong. You don't really care. For some reason, you care about mistreating animals in life, but killing them unnecessarily is fine. So I don't know how to change your feelings, and you don't have logic to back it up. You're not willing to face logic about it. You care about the environment, but not enough to change your diet significantly? I don't know. I don't know how to change people other than presenting the logic.
Well, that's the idea. That's the idea that there has to be some place to start, you know, because as I mentioned, while I can't imagine going fully vegan, I think the reduction of meat consumption, but of course it would have to be obviously on a large scale, like pretty much worldwide, or a very significant portion of that 7 billion
the Chinese
people.
Government's most recent dietary advice, like the USDA puts out the diet advice for Americans.
Mm-hmm.
The Chinese government put out, and they specifically said reduce meat intake 50%. So the China's doing it.
There you go. Okay, so possibly a start, especially considering what portion of the world's population is Chinese, like 3 billion. I know it's over 2.
Might as well be all of it. It's China.
Like I said, so I'm the perfect example, because one of the reasons I say I don't know what it would take to change anybody else's mind is because I don't know what it would even take to change my own mind, you know, regardless of what data, you know, as you say, attacking them with logic, regardless of what argument somebody presents, or even if they're not trying to necessarily change my mind or promote an idea, just putting some information out there. Oh, by the way, you know, did you know that when you're eating meat, this is what happens? These are the resources that are used. It's our nature to keep things the way they are, that I think. So since this is the way that things have been for so long, you know, for all of human history, as far as I know, there are some cultures out there that either have very little meat intake, or probably none, just because, you know, where they're at, there's not really meat for them to eat. Yeah, go ahead.
There recently fossils were found of Neanderthals that are like 40,000 years old, and they could examine, you know, the dentistry and other things to discover exactly what, or generally what they were eating, and they found that they were eating no animal products whatsoever.
Yeah.
So whether that was by choice or not, there were even vegan Neanderthals. Maybe they were just good people.
Well,
not
in
many,
a lot of those cases, because
they scavenged for what they could get.
Well, in a lot of those cases, it would be because of at least one and possibly 2 reasons. One, just simply being the scarcity of any game animals that they could have had for meat. And then, of course, even if they were available, their ability to actually hunt them, depending on where they were at. So I think it absolutely makes sense that throughout history, you know, mainly due to geographics, that there were going to be, you know, small bands of, you know, humans, whatever point in history, where meat consumption was either minimal or possibly even non-existent. But very small pockets. Vast majority, you know, especially the ancestors that we've come from for the past 100,000 years, you know, they're meat eaters. If they could get their hands on meat, they would definitely eat it. And the furs, and of course, things like that.
How much meat do you think our ancestors were eating? Like, just as a percentage of their diet or something.
Oh,
or how often they were eating meat, something like that.
Well, see, that's the thing. Like, for example, if they were in an area where meat wasn't necessarily that, like, a lot of it available, and then they could have hunted. I mean, that happened with buffalo, right? Certain game animals could be hunted to, if not extinction, at least extinction in an area or where it's a lot harder to catch them. So that definitely could have varied. And then, of course, some groups of humans may have been in plains where animals were just abundant and meat was on the table every night. So I think it would depend on the region as to how much meat was in their diet.
Wherever animals were abundant, there must have been plants to feed those animals.
Sure.
Don't you think it's easier to pick berries and pull up potatoes and get mangoes out of a tree than it is to hunt down a buffalo?
Oh, we know that they did. I mean, a lot of plant consumption came from our ancestors watching what the other animals ate. So if they saw an animal eat this particular berry or plant, then in their minds, even if they're not articulating it this way, that's safe to eat, or at least let's try it that way. I'm pretty sure. I think it was you that brought this up. I could be wrong, but when we talk about milk consumption, how is it that somebody, looked at a cow and said, "Who I should drink that?" Yeah, who that looked at a cow and said, who should drink that? But again, I think what it comes down to is, they saw the calf drinking it. That must be safe for consumption. So that's.
And they decided to do the same thing with goats.
In fact, I don't. Except again in areas where this time when we're talking about the plants. Unless there were areas where plant life was rare, I'm sure these people spend a lot of time out gathering those things because a lot of game animals simply are hard to catch. You got to trap them, you got to kill them.
It's easier and it's safer.
Yes, exactly. Well, I don't know necessarily about safer, but depending on what's out there.
The plant isn't going to stab you in the gut with its horns.
But the tiger or the saber tooth might be there waiting for you to come out and get you. I mean, it's hunting you.
Might just as well be hunting down the buffalo, though, so I don't think that danger has changed.
Yeah. But no, I mean, it's, like I said, omnivores, not the balance may shift, but we definitely grew up eating everything, and a lot
I'm not
of that.
arguing that humans can't eat animals. We're able to gain calories from them, and causes terrible health deficits. Is that something you care about, OP? Your own health? You seem to at least somewhat care about it.
Oh, yeah. I think I mentioned that it was, a year ago after I got out of the hospital, just while I was trying to get better from the illness that I'd been there for, which was pneumonia. I just figured, while I'm, making these changes and following doctor's orders, why not? Which is why then probably shortly thereafter, I expressed a little bit of interest, in what you were doing and various things. We've talked about different foods. I tried your pancakes. So things like that, I wouldn't say it's been like a huge change when it comes to like the numbers, if you were talking about percentages of what I've eat, but physically, that change has been noticeable. Yes.
Okay. Are you worried about any specific diseases, maybe that run in your family, or maybe that you're aware that you might be at high risk of just because of your physical shape?
The main thing that would run in my family, because we're talking my mom, my grandma, at least one of my uncles, and a cousin, is diabetes, and specifically type 2, which, if people don't know, is the more dangerous type.
I don't know how true that is. It's kind of a strange way to put it. I mean, I guess.
But
I could see the complications being different.
Here's the other thing.
Type 1 diabetes is destruction of the beta cells in the pancreas, so you can't produce insulin, and then the sugar can't be pulled out of the blood into your muscle cells. Type 2 diabetes, for those who don't know, is where you get intramyocellular lipids, fat inside your muscle cells, preventing insulin from working. Insulin pulls sugar out of the blood into the muscle cells. So your blood sugar gets too high and causes damage to your organs.
And the reason I was going to say, which is why I'm saying that's a more dangerous one. Plus, it's also the one that causes what is called neuropathy. I'm not certain if you're
diabetic neuropathy.
Yeah, which is basically it's a numbness in the limbs that eventually, if untreated, and even if treated in some cases, could lead, for example, to the amputation of those limbs or appendages.
Type 2 diabetes does not run in families. Diet runs in families. Type 2 diabetes is 100% preventable. It's treatable and usually, as long as there hasn't been damage to the pancreas, curable with a diet of whole plant foods, avoiding animal products, and among processed foods, especially avoiding oils. I can show you the work of Dr. Neil Barnard, who does this personally. He runs research projects where he takes people with diabetes and cures them with an ad libitum diet of whole plant foods, which means eating as much as you want. I can show you the broad study specifically, which was done in New Zealand, which took a bunch of fat diabetic people, let them eat as many whole plant foods as they want, and they all lost weight, and they all improved their diabetes in the time frame of the study, or were entirely off medication.
Excuse me.
Diabetes, type 2 diabetes, is entirely preventable. Type 1, maybe, but there's still research going on about why that happens as a child, and you can't recover your beta cells in your pancreas. Type 2, though, entirely preventable. That's not enough motivation for you to eat a healthy diet?
Well, see, that's been the whole reason for the start to the change. That's been the reason to reduce meat intake, and not just eat more things like plant-based foods, but also avoiding the things like the sugar. I mean, I haven't drunk soda pop in a while.
When
Candy.
you say sugar, you mean refined sugar, or are you also avoiding fruit?
We're talking, you know, your refined sugar, your Coke, your Pepsi,
Okay, I just want to
things like
clarify
that.
for other people.
But also for, you know, just the snack foods that you were talking about that, okay, so they may not have things like meat products that are bad for you, but they also don't necessarily have any nutritional value. In other words, I could make myself full with these foods, but then my body wouldn't be getting what it needs. So being more aware of that has also been something that I've been trying to
not consuming empty calories.
Exactly.
Are you worried about any other diseases? If type 2 diabetes isn't enough of a motivation?
I mean, I'm probably just one of those people that's lucky. Like, for example, I don't know if you know this. I used to smoke, and I smoked for a while, and then I quit, and it's been quite some time. So it'd be hard to say if in the long run, once I near the end of my life, if what's already there would have caused any complications. But so far, no. So there are just those people, I think, that I'm lucky that no matter what they do, even if they are doing things that are bad for them, their bodies are adaptable enough that they can get away with it. You know, we're not, like I said, I have no, like, for example, I have no allergies, right? And I'm not just talking food allergies. I just talk any allergies. So, you know, generally speaking, the food's never been an issue. And I think one of the reasons, if you set aside psychosomatic, you know, because I think that can be a reason when initially when somebody tries something new, whatever it is, they might think they're feeling better. But enough, I've made the changes in my diet. I've been doing it long enough that I'm pretty sure that the differences that I feel are actually from the change in the diet itself and not just up here in my head. So, and the reason I was worried, what I was worried about is this, because we touched on it. As I started to read about, at least in the industrial meat production, exactly what they put in those animals, you know, the hormones, things that, like, you know, makes muscles grow bigger. I think steroids are part of that. Two things. Those things, I know, studies have been showing that can cause health problems. Specifically, which ones I don't know. So while yes, when I say I don't have any specific worries, it's just because I'm trying to reduce the effect of what intaking those chemicals or ingesting those chemicals might have. But also, I now know, if we didn't touch on it, that these animals that are raised in these conditions in these places, if you're going to get any nutrients from their meat, there's actually less, because also those conditions which cause them stress. Like for example, you and I could actually eat a healthy diet, but if we're under a considerable amount of stress all the time, we're still going to be less healthy. Our bodies are going to show signs of that stress. So the same thing is true for these animals. So a general concern because of those chemicals, but like nothing specific, you know, if you're going to talk about cancer or something or whatever.
Okay, so you eat the better meat that doesn't have as many antibiotics and growth hormones and stuff, but no matter how free-range, organic, etc., even if it was wild-caught, the meat you eat is, or the animals you eat are, they're still, as soon as you eat them, increase your insulin-like growth factor 1 in your blood, which directly feeds cancer cells. Animal protein was showed by Dr. T. Colin Campbell. The protein, the thing that everybody thinks is so good, feeds cancer cells. Okay? The fat in animal products, it's like in a plant, you get fat along with fiber and all this other stuff, and the fat is slowly digested. If you eat it from oil or from an animal product where the fat is just free, it goes straight into your bloodstream, into your muscle cells, and causes insulin resistance, which is type 2 diabetes. Cholesterol is in every animal product, except apparently it's really low in egg whites, or maybe it's not in egg whites, but anyway, they're shit in egg whites regardless, like choline. It's still animal protein. The cholesterol is going to raise your blood cholesterol. blood cholesterol, when not affected by drugs, is the what do they call it? It's the one necessary risk factor for atherosclerosis, which is the clogging of your arteries. You could have all the other risk factors for atherosclerosis, but not high cholesterol, and you would not develop atherosclerosis. Okay, the cholesterol in animal products and the fat in animal products raises your blood cholesterol. So do refined sugars and oils.
Well, the one... Okay, and I'll have to find this to send this to you, because this is from one of the Harvard studies. So, well, I'm sure that because they talked about these specific things, they're talking about the specific types of fats and things, and one of the concerns being that, you know, actually having fat in your diet is not only not a bad thing, but can be healthy, but it's a matter of getting what's in the fat and whether or not, you know, you can get some of those things from other sources, you know, other than animal products. But the big one for me, from what I'd read, is that it's not a matter of a lack of nutrients in some of the plant-based things, but it's some of the other things that are in there, and specifically, and I don't know if you know something about this. So there are these processed foods, you know, that are vegan. You know, some of these things that you can buy in the market, and some of these things that they use as the, like when I talked about the texture and stuff of the foods, it's some of the things that they use to emulate those things to, you know,
like isolated soy protein.
Yeah, exactly. To get people, you know, to try these products, to make it not so alien to them from what they're used to eating, that can still be problematic. So because of that, even though it had been really recently, because of that, I don't know what's in it yet. So I stopped going to the Wendy's to get their veggie burger, and I stopped getting the pre-made frozen vegan things.
Let me make it very simple for you, OP, and for everyone else. Everybody knows processed foods are bad for you. Some people don't realize that oils are also bad for you. Oil is the table sugar of fat. You take a plant, you refine everything out of it like a beet or a sugar cane, and just get the sugar. Now you've got refined sugar. You've lost all the nutrients. Take an olive and refine all the good stuff out of it and just get the fat. Now you've got an oil, and that's bad for you too. Most people can generally come to agree with that. If you don't agree, you can go and read the research. You can go and watch Dr. Michael Greger's work on this on nutritionfacts.org. Animal products are unhealthy for you too. Whole plant foods will not hurt you, and the fungi that are good for you. You can get everything you need from whole plant foods without getting cholesterol and much saturated fat, unless you're eating coconuts, which may or may not be a concern in coconuts. I don't know. That's it. I have to go, OP, because it's past 2:30, so we'd better wrap this up.
Okay, can I ask one quick question? I think it's related to veganism, but it's totally different than what we've covered so far. And that is pet ownership.
Don't buy pets or breed pets, but rescuing pets is obviously helping the animal.
Okay, and then, the other one's going to take too much time. I'll tell you in an email later. So anything else you just wanted to say before we wrap it up?
I want to say for people, I don't know how to convince specific people to do anything. But I think if people had to justify their morals logically, then they would have to face, well, either they have to bullshit their way out of it and go out on massive tangents, or they would have to face that they're doing something immoral. So if you please take this challenge, you can hashtag it, name the trait if you like. Name a difference or collection of differences between animals and humans that justifies unnecessarily killing animals for taste preference. And if you reversed that difference, it would justify unnecessarily killing humans for taste preference. So you could say animals are less intelligent. Well, if there's a very unintelligent human, is it okay to kill them for taste preference? No. Animals have a smaller range of emotions. Well, if a human had a smaller range of emotions, would it be okay to kill them for taste preference? No, etc. And go vegan, you bastards. Those are my closing words.
So that is, again, that's Nicholas. I, again, am Dennis, although some of you watching this will know me as OPNerd. Thanks for taking the time. Leave some comments, because if Nicholas is willing and has time in the future, we can probably do a follow-up, because
we can answer questions if people have them.
Answer questions, and also maybe touch on some things that we really didn't get around to today. Thanks for watching. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.